You're lazing around on the deck of the ship when you see something whitish-gray covering the horizon. Like in a horror movie or your worst nightmare, this weird fog is nearing the vessel. It's infinite. You can't see where it starts or where it ends. Soon it makes the ship look like a grain of sand in a vast desert. That's when the realization hits. It's an iceberg, and your ship is likely going to repeat the Titanic's fate. Now, all this is a very likely scenario, since the world's biggest iceberg, A23A, is on the move again after months of spinning in a huge water vortex. And it's actually the second time in just a couple of years that this massive chunk of ice has broken free. The first time was in 2023, when the berg went wandering around after being stuck on the seafloor for a staggering 37 years. The thing is huge, about 3 times the size of New York City. It also weighs nearly 1 trillion tons. The giant chunk of ice first broke off from Antarctica's Filsner ice shelf back in 1986, but instead of floating away, it got grounded on the seafloor just a few miles from where it started. Because of that, it melted much more slowly than most icebergs. In December 2023, A23A finally broke free and started to drift away from Antarctica. But it didn't get far before getting stuck again, this time near the South Orkney Islands. It got trapped in something called a Taylor column. That's a huge spinning water current that forms when ocean currents swirl around an underwater mountain. At one point, A23A was rotating around 15 degrees counterclockwise every day. Luckily, as of December 2024, the iceberg escaped the Taylor column and is now slowly moving again. Researchers are super curious to see if it'll follow the same path as other giant icebergs that have broken off from Antarctica, or if it'll find its own unique way. Such enormous icebergs, such as A23A, release nutrients into the water as they melt, and it can actually create hotspots of life in parts of the ocean that are usually pretty empty. But there's still a lot we don't understand about how the size, shape, or origin of the iceberg might affect that process. So, to figure it out, scientists have been collecting water samples from the areas A23A is expected to pass through, and they'll keep collecting samples as it drifts along. Hopefully, it'll give us a better idea of how massive icebergs like this one influence the ocean around them. By the way, the glacier our monster of an iceberg was once part of could be very, very old, literally ancient. In Antarctica, the oldest glacier ice might be close to 1 million years old. Over in Greenland, the oldest glacier ice is more than 100,000 years old. And in Alaska, the oldest glacier ice ever recovered, found in a basin between Mount Bona and Mount Churchill, is only about 30,000 years old, a mere child. At the same time, in a typical Alaskan Valley glacier, it only takes about 100 years for newly formed ice to travel through the entire length of the glacier. For something like Bering Glacier, which is Alaska's largest and stretches over 140 miles, the ice can move through the whole thing in less than 400 years. And that's a lot of movement for such a massive glacier. Now let's move on to Iceberg Alley, a stretch of the Atlantic Ocean that runs from the Arctic to Newfoundland. If you want to see as many icebergs as you can, that's the place to be. Tons of icebergs float through this place every year. Most of them come from Greenland. In spring and summer, big chunks of glaciers break off and get carried by north-south currents through Baffin Bay into the Labrador Sea, where they eventually melt. Some icebergs also come from Canada's shoreline, traveling through the Davis Strait and into the Labrador Sea before drifting along Newfoundland's eastern and western coasts. These massive ice chunks are really old too, about 10,000 years. Every year, about 400 to 800 medium and large icebergs pass through Iceberg Alley. How fast they drift depends on their size, shape, currents, waves, and wind, but the average speed is less than a half mile per hour. Now, there are 6 types of icebergs that make their way through Iceberg Alley. Tabular icebergs are flat slabs of ice, much wider than they are tall. Blocky icebergs have steep sides and sharp angles, like cut-off pyramids. Wedged icebergs have one steep side and one sloping side. Dome icebergs have a rounded top. Pinnacle icebergs have one or more steep peaks sticking up. And dry dock icebergs are U-shaped with a hollowed-out section. They all look incredible. Comment below which is your favorite type. Anyway, as these icebergs drift south, the warmer water speeds up their melting, making them pretty unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. Nowadays, satellites help track medium and large icebergs to prevent accidents, but smaller icebergs can still be risky for small boats. One iceberg made headlines in 2018 when it got unusually close to the Newfoundland village of Fairyland. Pictures of the giant iceberg towering over the village's houses went viral. It got stuck in a 330-foot deep water, which turned out to be too shallow for its massive size. And now I'll take you on an unusual journey to the past to witness the birth of something beautiful and equally disastrous. Its very existence led to one of the greatest tragedies in history. Watch, an enormous chunk of ice is breaking off a glacier in southwest Greenland. It's made of snow that fell over 100,000 years ago, when mammoths were still wandering around the planet. The enormous iceberg starts its long journey. It stretches more than 1,700 feet in length and weighs 75 million tons. Despite its size, it's pretty peaceful and stays far away from ships and the busy transport routes near where it was born. But then, it starts floating south, much farther than most icebergs ever get. Usually, icebergs like this melt way before they reach such warm waters. Out of the 15,000 to 30,000 icebergs that drift away from Greenland's glaciers every year, only about 1% make it all the way to the Atlantic. So the fact that this iceberg keeps going and reaches over 5,000 miles south of the Arctic Circle by April makes it truly unique. Even after months of melting, this block of ice is still incredibly massive. It weighs around 1.5 million tons, which is almost twice as much as the Golden Gate Bridge. Above the water, its visible parts tower more than 100 feet high. But like most icebergs, the majority of it, about 90%, is hidden below the surface. The iceberg's story takes a tragic turn on April 14, 1912, when, guess what? Yep, it comes across the ocean liner Titanic. The ship is about 370 miles from Newfoundland in the North Atlantic Ocean when the iceberg seems to appear out of nowhere. The crew doesn't spot it until just minutes before the crash. Why don't they see it sooner? That's a good question. Now, most people imagine icebergs as tall, bright, white chunks of ice, maybe even covered with snow. But in reality, icebergs come in all sorts of colors. Some are striped, patterned, or even have candy-like swirls, and they can also be black. There are two ways an iceberg can turn black. When the ice is extremely pure, with no bubbles or cracks, then it absorbs all the light instead of reflecting it, making it look black. Or a volcanic eruption can cover a glacier in ash. If ice from that glacier breaks off, it can have a dark or black color. Now, scientists still aren't sure why the Titanic's iceberg looked dark, or even if it really did. But one sailor who was on the lookout in the crow's nest said it seemed black. Another described it as gray or dark gray. One theory is this iceberg could have been a blackbird, which forms when the top part melts, causing the iceberg to roll over. If the bottom is smooth enough to absorb light, it looks dark. But even if the iceberg wasn't truly black, nighttime could have made it much harder to spot. Icebergs don't reflect much light, especially if they're jagged or vertical. They end up blending into the dark, shimmering ocean. Without radar, icebergs at night are incredibly hard to see, which is probably why the Titanic's crew didn't notice it in time.
The snowpack over your head splits in two right in front of your eyes and starts tumbling down in the frozen slope to its resting place far, far below. Anything in its way is crushed under the immense mass of snow and debris. You're witnessing an avalanche, one of the most dangerous natural disasters. But what if I tell you about another kind of avalanche, no less blood-chilling than the mountain one? And the most bizarre thing about it is that it occurs underwater. Underwater avalanches are powerful and disastrous natural phenomena, often much more dangerous than land ones. They have the potential to wreak havoc on the entire planet, leading to catastrophic consequences. The most alarming thing? They occur all the time under the surface of the ocean, impossible to see, predict, and extremely difficult to measure. Such avalanches can get 100 times larger than land ones, and they pose a great risk to the world's communications, capable of leaving the entire planet without the internet. But we'll talk about it a bit later. First, let's go 60,000 years back into the past. We're near the northwest coast of Africa, ready to witness the colossal scale and devastating impact of a ginormous underwater avalanche. It started as a quite small underwater landslide in the Agadir Canyon. At first, it was just 0.35 cubic miles of material, but in no time, this mass increased more than 100 times in size while traveling across the Atlantic Ocean floor. As the avalanche sped up and grew, it picked up gravel, sand, rocks, and mud. It carved a devastating path through one of the world's largest submarine canyons, wiping out all forms of animal and plant life on its way. The disastrous flow was so powerful that it literally eroded a 250-mile stretch of the canyon, cutting hundreds of feet into its sides and damaging a total area of 1,740 square miles. That's the area of more than 3.5 New York cities. As for the force of the flow, it was so immense that it propelled massive boulders up the canyon walls to heights of up to 430 feet. Before scientists discovered the evidence of this catastrophic event, they had seriously underestimated the scale of destruction caused by submarine avalanches. By the way, these devastating catastrophes can start not only far away in the ocean, but also at estuaries. Let's go back to 14 January 2020 and see for ourselves. A turbidity current, a rapid, downhill flow of water containing a lot of sediment, rushed more than 680 miles from the Congo River estuary in the deep sea. This current appeared due to two factors: terrible flooding along the Congo River in late December 2019 and unusually large spring tides. This resulted in an avalanche of sand and mud. Its volume was equivalent to 1/3 of all the sediment produced annually by all the rivers in the world. This sediment avalanche accelerated, increasing in speed from 17 feet per second in the upper part of the Congo Canyon to 26 feet per second when it reached the end of the channel, almost 700 miles away from the coastline. This route made it the longest avalanche of sediment ever measured on our planet. 2 days later, the flow reached the deep ocean. The avalanche broke 2 seabed telecommunication cables, cutting internet data speeds all the way across West, Central, and South Africa. Now, before this disaster, scientists considered that measuring powerful deep-sea avalanches was impractical. But the sediment flow in the Congo Canyon could be monitored directly, finally allowing researchers to assess how major river floods connected to the deep sea. They also concluded that how often underwater avalanches occurred depended on where the observer was. Seafloor canyons that are close to river mouths can experience several tiny avalanches per year. Other systems, far from river discharges like the Agadir Canyon, can only have one monster of an avalanche every 10,000 years or so. You're likely wondering, what can trigger an avalanche under the surface of the ocean? Well, earthquakes, typhoons, high tides, river floods, and even volcanic eruptions. And due to our changing climate, such events become more and more frequent and intense. At the same time, these triggers don't mean that an avalanche is bound to happen, nor do they relate to the scale of the event. See for yourself. In 1755, a powerful earthquake hit the coast of Portugal, wiping out large parts of Lisbon. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives during that disaster, but it only triggered a tiny underwater avalanche. And in 1929, a large earthquake off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, triggered the largest underwater avalanche ever recorded. The flow traveled at a speed of 42 miles per hour, carrying boulders, sand, and mud. It snapped 11 seabed cables on its journey downhill. The avalanche was so powerful, it produced a tsunami that claimed the lives of 28 people along the coastline. Now, submarine avalanches are totally invisible because they happen deep under the ocean surface, which makes them extremely hard to study. But we must find a way because these flows are super important. They transport sediments, nutrients, and even pollutants across the ocean floor. So, a research team from Liverpool decided to unravel this mystery. Over the last 40 years, they've collected more than 300 samples from the ocean floor. Combined with seismic and bathymetric data, which is a fancy word for ocean mapping, they managed to reconstruct a massive submarine avalanche. It was the first time an underwater avalanche of this size was mapped out. An even cooler thing, the event itself started off pretty modestly, but it quickly evolved into a colossal avalanche that grew to more than 650 feet tall. To put that into perspective, imagine a skyscraper-sized avalanche zooming from Liverpool to London, cutting a trench 100 feet deep and 9 miles wide. Then it spread out over an area bigger than the UK, covering it with several feet of sand and mud. That's like burying a whole country. These findings are actually a big deal because they show that even a small underwater landslide can turn into something massive and super destructive. But that's not the worst. Think about undersea internet cables, which are essential for global communication. There are more than 550 active seafloor cables around the world. Their combined length is a whopping 870,000 miles. That's enough to wrap around our planet 35 times. When a submarine avalanche breaks seafloor cables, the effects are usually super expensive and devastating. For example, in 2006, an earthquake in Taiwan triggered underwater avalanches that cut loads of seafloor cables connecting Southeast Asia with the rest of the world. The largest internet operator in China had a 90% loss of traffic to the USA at the peak of the event. As for Taiwan itself, it experienced between 74 to 100% loss in traffic to neighboring islands. So now you probably get why we need to learn more about this natural phenomenon. Luckily, researchers at Tulane University have found a way to study it in 3D. Previous studies only looked at submarine avalanches in 2D, which didn't give the full picture of how they actually behaved. The new research focused on how underwater flows interacted with mini basins, natural features on the ocean floor that look like shallow bowls. Despite being called mini, these bowls can be huge, up to 4 square miles. When turbidity currents flow into these mini basins, they don't just stop. No, they hit the far side and curl back around like water eddies in a stream. These swirling flows move the sediment around before it settles on the ocean floor. The size of the mini basin and the speed of the flow can change how the current behaves. If the basin is big and the current is slow, it starts to fill up with sediment. But if you crank up the flow speed or shrink the basin, the current starts to overflow, spilling over the basin. To study all this, the researchers created a mini version of a mini basin in a pool and used different speeds of flow to simulate turbidity currents. They even made their own sediment mixtures to see how different sizes of particles would behave. In the end, they managed to mimic real-life ocean conditions, but on a smaller, manageable scale. Pretty cool, huh?
So here's the famous Grand Canyon in Arizona, a gigantic crack in the ground of incredible beauty and grandeur. Now, imagine it dozens of miles longer and lying at the bottom of the ocean. In fact, you don't have to imagine it, because you can see this scene in real life. A massive crack in the ocean floor lies about 620 miles west of Portugal. This mysterious rift is called the King's Trough Complex. It's a broad system of parallel trenches and basins descending into the dark depths of the Earth's crust. All of this awe-inspiring beauty stretches for about 310 miles. The deepest part of the system is known as Peak Deep. It's located at the eastern end and is one of the deepest places in the Atlantic Ocean. The Bermuda Triangle, the Mariana Trench, and other places, surrounded by mysteries, secrets, and legends, may fade into the background compared to the King's Trough Complex. There are no frightening stories or records of vanished ships here, but just imagine it. At the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, In icy waters, where almost no light reaches, lies a giant unexplored rift. What's down there? What kind of creatures might be found? Perhaps there are remains of sunken ships. We are unlikely to find out anytime soon because reaching it is extremely difficult due to the immense pressure. For now, the only thing scientists truly understand is the origin of this underwater canyon. But first, let's look at how similar formations appear on the surface. The Grand Canyon, for example, was formed by a river. Meandering slowly over millions of years, it carved through the region, washing away and grinding down sedimentary rock. So here's the question. Do you think something similar happened to the floor of the Atlantic? Of course, there are no rivers there, but what about underwater currents? Could they have created such a giant, dark fissure reaching deep into the Earth's crust? Well, in fact, no. The origin of the King's Trough complex is connected to the movement of tectonic plates and the thermal activity beneath them. But how did scientists determine the cause? Well, the rift lies deep underwater in complete darkness. That wasn't a problem for researchers. They sailed to the site on a research vessel and used a powerful sonar system to create a detailed map of the area. After obtaining a clear picture of the terrain, they selectively retrieved volcanic rock samples from different parts of the trench using a chain bag dredge. After that, they delivered the samples to laboratories for chemical analysis. All of this data helped scientists discover that between 37 and 24 million years ago, this part of the North Atlantic temporarily became a boundary zone between the European and African tectonic plates. Tectonic plates are enormous slabs of rock that cover the Earth's crust like a planetary-scale mosaic. They move, collide, overlap, and push away from one another. The King's Trough complex formed during a period when the Earth's crust was splitting apart because of the movement of tectonic plates. It pulled away from east to west, resembling a giant zipper being undone. Now, in addition, scientists found evidence that the crust in this area was subjected to intense heating, rising from deep within the planet. Although researchers don't know exactly what occurred, it's likely that hot material, known as a mantle plume, rose toward the surface. All of these events deformed and fractured the Earth's crust, leaving us with what could be called an underwater Grand Canyon. But why are we interested in this at all? What does knowledge of events that happened tens of millions of years ago give us? Well, scientists now better understand how processes deep within the mantle can influence the movement of tectonic plates. This major research also provides insight into the geological evolution of the Atlantic seafloor. All of it helps humanity better understand similar processes taking place today. For example, near the Azores, another giant system of trenches known as the Tercera Rift is forming right now. What will happen next to this rift? Is such an event dangerous for people? One of the reasons scientists conduct these studies is to answer questions like these. It's unknown what secrets may still be hidden within that underwater fracture. But let's return to land and our beloved Grand Canyon. Even though it is famous worldwide, there are things inside this canyon that may surprise you. The Grand Canyon is ancient, yet it continues to change. Rock erosion happens slowly, but with each passing year, the canyon grows deeper and its shape evolves. Now, if you plan to visit the Grand Canyon, prepare for unpredictable weather. The canyon has its own climate, which can differ from the surrounding region. Because of the dramatic elevation changes, temperatures constantly shift. Snow may fall along the rim, while not far below, people inside the canyon enjoy warm sunshine. Walk a little farther and higher, and you might find yourself in the rain. Take shelter lower down, and you could end up surrounded by fog. So plan your route carefully and check forecasts from official weather services. There's both good and bad news for archaeologists. In the Grand Canyon, you can find ancient fossils of marine creatures more than 1 billion years old. In its caves, there are traces of land mammals dating back 10,000 years. The bad news is there are no dinosaurs here. The canyon most likely formed after those ancient reptiles became extinct. Now, one thing that may surprise you during a hike through the Grand Canyon is Supai Village, with a population of about 200 people. It's located at the base of the canyon within the Havasupai Indian Reservation. It's the most remote settlement in the continental U.S. and the only place in the country where mail is still delivered by pack mule. There are no roads leading to the village, and if you want to visit it, you'll need to prepare for a challenging hike along steep slopes under the blazing sun. Beyond its fascinating natural features, the Grand Canyon also has things that are almost fantastical and eerie, at least according to rumors and legends. For example, there's a hotel room known as the Grand Canyon Cavern Suite inside the canyon, deep within one of the caves. At a depth of 220 feet, guests find a luxurious room with all the comforts and, according to some accounts, something unsettling. Some visitors have reported stones moving inside the room, frightening dancing shadows, strange sounds, and movements near the bed where they were sleeping. You might also hear many local legends about spirits and monsters that inhabit the canyon. Of course, these are just stories, but some truly tragic events have taken place here. The canyon has become a grave for many people. Over time, around 800 people, according to official records, have passed away here. There were accidents, mysterious incidents, and real tragedies. For example, in 1956, 2 airplanes collided in the sky above the canyon. And that was far from the only case. So be careful when you come here. Stay away from the cliffs and keep close to your group. There is also a theory that ancient advanced civilizations once lived in the Grand Canyon. These rumors began in 1909 when a local newspaper published a major article claiming that 2 archaeologists from the Smithsonian Institution had discovered a secret tunnel filled with Egyptian artifacts and mummies. The Grand Canyon and ancient Egypt? How could that be possible, considering the vast distance between them? Soon after the article was published, the Smithsonian Institution issued a denial. No archaeologist from the institution had conducted such research, and certainly none had found Egyptian artifacts. Many believe the newspaper had published a hoax, although some suggest the institution deliberately concealed information about hidden discoveries. In any case, the story seems highly unlikely. Now, even though you know all this and want to see something similar yet different, you should travel to Tibet, where the Yarlung Zangpo Canyon is located. It is 2 miles deeper and 30 miles longer than the Grand Canyon. There, you would also see many fascinating things, but that's a topic far too large and deserves another video. You're sailing on a calm ocean when you see it. A giant wave rising out of the water, towering over your boat. Uh-oh. But before you can react, the deck suddenly disappears beneath your feet, and you're falling into a deep and vast pit in the sea. Neither outcome gives you a chance to survive. Apparently, the ocean can both crash down on you and suddenly drop away beneath your feet. It's not your day. Well, in the first case, it will be a giant rogue wave. These waves are huge and dangerous ocean waves that appear suddenly and are at least twice as tall as the waves around them. These waves can rise up in the open ocean without warning and may move in a different direction than the wind and other waves. They're extremely dangerous even for big ships because they form super quickly and grow to be exceptionally large. But there's even a scarier threat in the ocean: rogue holes. Those are massive pits in the water, and until recently, no one could confirm their existence. They are the opposite of rogue waves. Instead of a huge wave rising up, they are deep dips in the ocean that appear suddenly, sometimes just before or after a big wave. The water drops sharply, often surrounded by normal-sized waves on either side. When the difference between the top of the waves and the bottom of the dip is much bigger than normal, it can be just as dangerous for ships as a giant 80 to 100-foot wave. Now, scientists have figured out that big waves and deep dips often happen together, so the danger they present now doubles. ESA's MaxWave project was studying rogue waves when they found evidence of rogue holes. After that, researchers even recreated rogue holes in a large water tank to study them safely. And they found out that, apparently, rogue waves and rogue holes come from the same hidden pattern in the ocean. You see, the MaxWave project didn't officially list rogue holes as a separate type of wave. But scientists did notice something unusual in their data. They saw deep drops in the ocean surface appearing together with very large wave peaks. This suggested that rogue holes might exist, but there was not enough evidence to confirm it. To test this idea, a team of researchers at Kyoto University recreated ocean-like waves in a long wave tank, about 50 feet long. It worked like a controlled mini-ocean where scientists could carefully adjust wave size and speed. Inside this tank, they were able to create both giant rogue waves and deep rogue holes. The rogue holes looked like sudden voids in the water, deep dips surrounded by normal-sized waves, like the ocean briefly sank down in one spot. It's similar to a sudden pothole appearing on the road, but filled with moving water instead of asphalt. So imagine normal waves as fast repeating bumps moving across the water. Now imagine a much slower, bigger wave on top of that. It looks like a rolling hill that lifts everything up and down. This bigger wave controls how strong the smaller waves are. If the hill hits a wave right when it's already at its highest point, the wave grows into a huge rogue wave, as if someone stacked one wave on top of another. But if that same hill pushes down when a wave is at its lowest point, it creates a deep hole in the water instead. It's like the ocean suddenly drops beneath your feet. So it's the same process, just timed differently. At times, it creates a giant wall of water, and at other times, it's a sudden dangerous drop. So the results of the experiment matched the mathematical predictions. They proved that those strange wave patterns were not just a theory, but something that can really happen in the ocean. In 2016, scientists compared mathematical models with real ocean measurements and found patterns that match both giant waves and deep holes in nature. Of course, in the real ocean, these shapes are not perfectly smooth like in experiments. The waves often have sharper, uneven edges, like a hill that is steeper on one side than the other. But even with these differences, they still followed the same hidden structure. This confirms that rogue waves and rogue holes are really two kinds of the same ocean event. They're just shaped differently by timing and energy. Meanwhile, we still really don't know the ocean. Most of it is a mystery to us. Less than 1/1000th of the seafloor has been seen up close. Imagine the size of Rhode Island or Luxembourg, hey, pick one. That tiny bit is what we have mapped. Everything else, deep trenches, cracks, caves, massive underwater mountains, remain blurry on our maps. Many phenomena went unexplained for centuries, too. For example, sailors kept reporting enormous waves that suddenly towered over everything else, sometimes more than twice the height of normal waves. Back then, most people thought these reports were exaggerations, like spotting mermaids or a giant squid. But those waves were real. Now, in 1826, Dumont d'Urville, a French naval officer and explorer, sailed the Indian Ocean on the ship Astrolabe. Yeah, it's a bad French accent. He saw waves of at least 80 to 100 feet tall during a violent storm that took the life of a crew member. At that time, Scientists thought waves couldn't exceed about 30 feet. So, even though his account sounded unbelievable, DeVille insisted on recording it. And guess what? Yup, instead of being praised, he was laughed at. Okay, I'll stop. Now, even earlier, in August 1498, during his third voyage to the Americas, Christopher Columbus and his crew heard an enormous roar from the sea and saw a wave rising behind their ships. It was as tall as the masts. The wave lifted the ships higher than anything they had ever experienced, and then dropped them into a massive trough. It was like a roller coaster made of water. Now, modern oceanography has confirmed that such colossal waves do exist. They're like skyscrapers suddenly appearing in the middle of a calm sea. A normal wave might be tall enough to reach the roof of a 2-story house, but a rogue wave can tower like a 10-story building. In 1861, such a wave apparently smashed a lighthouse in Ireland. It shattered lamps and sent debris tumbling down a lighthouse staircase. To do that, the water had to climb a 130-foot cliff and then an additional 85 feet of the lighthouse structure. It's almost as tall as a 20-story building. Rogue waves appear suddenly, often without warning, in the middle of the ocean. These waves form when winds, currents, and smaller waves line up just right, making a single giant wave much taller than the others around it. They aren't tsunamis and aren't caused by earthquakes or volcanoes. Physicists model this using something called the nonlinear Schrödinger equation, but basically, it just explains how the ocean can suddenly make a giant wall of water. On January 1, 1995, the Dropner wave struck an offshore gas platform in the North Sea off Norway. It measured 84 feet. This was the first time a rogue wave was officially recorded, proving those monster waves were real. But scientists still consider them rare. Well, by the year 2000, the European Space Agency's Max Wave project confirmed that rogue waves were more common than anyone thought. Using radar from ESA satellites, scientists studied the global ocean and found many waves exceeding 82 feet. Some of the largest recorded waves even reached 98 feet near Newfoundland. Suddenly, what people used to brush off as sailor stories turned out to be terrifyingly real. On the 17th of November 2020, a weather buoy near Vancouver Island, Canada, recorded a very unusual wave in the Pacific Ocean. The wave reached about 58 feet, while the surrounding waves were only about 20 feet. This made it much larger than normal waves around it. On the 29th of November 2022, a rogue wave hit the cruise ship Viking Polaris near Antarctica. One person lost their life, several others were hurt, and the trip was canceled. On the 18th of September 2023, a large wave hit a beach restaurant in South Africa. 7 people were injured, and one person was swept out to sea but luckily rescued. And on the 20th of January 2024, powerful waves hit a U.S. military site in the Marshall Islands. Buildings were damaged, some areas were flooded, and waves moved far inland, showing how destructive these events can be.
Hey, don't freak out. Those red waters you see aren't blood oceans. It's just a natural occurrence called the red tide. Red tides often happen in Florida, especially in the West Florida shelf, and they can stick around for weeks or even months. They're basically caused by an increase in algae levels, hence the color. Those algae produce toxins that can be harmful to marine life. They can also be bad news for us humans, causing symptoms like upset stomach and urgent bathroom trips, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. Volcanoes are super scary, but there's nothing scarier than getting taken out by a pyroclastic flow. These fiery flows move crazy fast and reach insane temperatures, like hotter than your oven on a pizza night. They're like a fireworks show of volcanic eruptions filled with ash, lava, and hot gas, speeding down mountains at 50 miles per hour. Some researchers claim they might even hit speeds of 450 miles per hour, almost as fast as a passenger jet. If you're unlucky enough to be in the path of a flow, you're in big trouble. The heat alone can turn you into a human barbecue, even if you try to hide in a building. The air around the flow can reach temperatures high enough to fry your insides, burn your clothes off, and leave metal melted into your skin, which almost sounds like a Marvel origin story. However, a lot of people have met their end because of these flows. But there's one crazy story about a guy named Luger Silbaris, still sounding like an origin story. So on the 7th of May, 1902, there was a major eruption on the island of Martinique. The night before, Silbaris had gotten into trouble and ended up in jail. Maybe this is a villain origin story. He'd been locked in a sturdy cell facing away from the volcano. The next morning, Mount Pella unexpectedly erupted, destroying St. Pierre within minutes. The flows wiped out around 30,000 people, but Silbaris survived in his cell and became known as the guy who lived through doomsday. The rescue team found him 4 days later. By the way, the cell still stands today. I hope somebody tested him for superpowers. Back on August 21st, 1986, a guy stumbled upon some animals showing no signs of life on his way to Nios village in Cameroon. To his shock, he later found out that everyone in the village had mysteriously passed away. The same thing happened at Lake Manaun in 1984. Turns out, those tragic incidents were caused by something called limnic eruptions, which are pretty rare disasters where carbon dioxide suddenly bursts out of lake waters, creating a hazardous gas cloud. These type of eruptions usually happen in lakes with high levels of CO2, which can be caused by things like volcanic gases and high pressure. Any little change in temperature or pressure can set off an eruption. So, experts have started looking into ways to safely release CO2 from lakes like Manaun and Nios in order to lower the risk of more disasters in the future. In March 2024, a video captured a terrifying moment of a woman disappearing into a sinkhole while browsing through a Chinese department store. Guess she got more than she bargained for. Ha ha ha. Moving on. The scene unfolded as the floor beneath her gave way, sending her plummeting into the abyss. In the midst of the chaos, another customer frantically ran away before returning to check on the woman who had fallen. Their quick thinking and the swift response of emergency crews and firefighters saved the day, resulting in only minor injuries for both women. I'm glad that lady checked on her because I would be gone. An anvil cloud is basically a big cloud made of ice particles that forms at the top of really tall thunderstorms, or those huge cumulonimbus clouds. The flat top shape is caused by the air rising in the storm and spreading out when it hits the stratosphere. That's why it's called an anvil. It looks like the tool metal workers use. Duh. The air from the anvil cloud is cooler than the stratosphere air, which keeps it from going any higher. You can spot anvil clouds from really far away, sometimes over 100 miles. Often you might see streaks of snow coming from the edge of the cloud known as virga. The snow disappears before hitting the ground because of the dry air. If you notice clouds poking through the flat top or bubbling up, it's an overshooting top, a sign of a super strong storm. Anvils are known for producing dangerous lightning. Normally, lightning comes from the bottom of a storm, but anvil clouds can produce really powerful lightning from the top. This lightning can strike out of nowhere, even from up to 30 miles away. So keep an eye on those anvil clouds if you see one forming nearby. Lahars are no joke. They're basically fast-moving, super dangerous streams of rock, ash, and water that come down the slopes of volcanoes. It's important for everyone to be aware of them. Scientists, policymakers, and even us regular folks. By understanding how lahars work and their potential impact, we can try to stay safe when volcanoes start acting up. Saving lives during natural disasters is the name of the game. There are two main types of lahars: debris lahars and mudflow lahars. Debris lahars are full of solid stuff like rocks and ash, while mudflow lahars are more waterlogged and sludgy. Lahars can be triggered by the rapid melting of snow or ice, heavy rain falling on loose volcanic material, or even a crater-like eruption. The volcano's characteristics and presence of water are key factors in how lahars form and move downhill. When lahars come barreling down mountains at speeds of up to 120 miles per hour, carrying loads of debris, it's a recipe for disaster. Unless you have a surfboard, but I doubt you'll have a surfboard on a volcano. Just saying. Also, it won't work. Going to the beach for a sunny vacation is the best. There's nothing like basking in the sun, feeling sand between your toes, and hearing waves crash against the shore. But even though it's all relaxing and picture perfect, always keep an eye on the water and never turn your back on the ocean. You may know about rip currents and tides, but have you ever heard of square waves? It's a real thing, and it can be pretty scary. Square waves, also known as cross seas, happen when two swells meet, forming a unique square pattern that looks like a checkerboard. They can be found along coastal areas, and while they are rare, they can create waves up to 10 feet high and make it tough for boats and swimmers to maneuver. If you find yourself in the water with square waves, you might feel like you're fighting against two different currents. The best thing to do is to not go too far out to begin with, and get out of the water as soon as the waves become too strong. Square waves are more dangerous for boats and ships, so it's best to stick to the shallow waters and stay safe. Whirlpools and maelstroms are powerful natural forces that have scared sailors for years. They happen when certain weather and current conditions come together just right. Most of them are safe if you stay away, but let's see what they really are and how they form. A whirlpool is basically water that starts spinning when two currents meet, or one current hits something solid like a wall. They can be big or small, depending on the speed of the water and waves. Most aren't dangerous, but there are also maelstroms, which are large, forceful, and violent whirlpools, caused by ocean tides and narrow straits. Tidal currents in places like Norway's Saltstraumen and Moxstraumen can create massive whirlpools. Scotland's Corryvreckan whirlpool is one of the world's largest. Other examples of whirlpools can be found in Japan, Canada, and New Zealand. Are they portals? They're definitely not portals. Researchers have recently looked into ancient underwater volcanic eruptions and how they affected Earth's climate. They studied materials from Bronze Age eruptions to learn more about their scale, dangers, and impact on climate. For example, one eruption about 3,600 years ago in the Aegean Sea caused chaos in Santorini. The study focused on this event to understand its importance. By analyzing volcanic deposits, the researchers gained insights into how future eruptions could affect climate. They discovered that sediment waves from shallow underwater eruptions could lead to tsunamis and impact the ocean floor. These findings help us understand how underwater volcanic eruptions relate to the marine environment, which can help us predict climate changes in the future.
Oh wow, there's a hole in the bottom of the ocean! It seems that the ocean has a leak. But it's not like a leak you would expect, where water is flowing out. It's more like a spring since water is flowing in, not out. This unique leak is something we know as Pythia's oasis. A grad student was the one who accidentally discovered it. He noticed bubbles that were rising to the surface. Normally, bubbles in the ocean tell us there might be some hydrothermal vents, which are hotspots for some pretty cool things. These vents are actually like hot springs on the seafloor, but instead of bubbling with warm water, they release a fluid that has been superheated in the crust of our planet. When seawater seeps into these cracks and travels deep into the crust, it comes into contact with the extremely hot mantle. This heats seawater to very high temperatures, and as it moves back up towards the surface, it carries dissolved gases and minerals. When the hot fluid shoots out of the vents, it mixes with the surrounding seawater and quickly cools down. Just a short distance away from the vent, the temperature can drop to a comfortable 68 degrees Fahrenheit or so, which is, as it seems, exactly what some creatures like. And there are some real weirdos living down there in the darkness, like ghostly fish, giant red-tipped tube worms and a unique type of shrimp with eyes on their back. And some of them, like tube worms and bacteria, rely on the chemicals and minerals released by the vents to survive in harsh conditions. But in this case, the bubbling water didn't come from a hydrothermal vent. It was there because of a spring, and that's a bit more concerning. You see, the water in this reservoir needs to stay where it is. If too much of it seeps out, there could be some serious consequences, especially for the surrounding area. You can see this unusual leak along the Cascadia subduction zone, which is a massive fault line off the Pacific Northwest coast. It's a place where two pretty big plates that make up Earth's crust come together and slide along each other. The water from Pythia's oasis kinda acts as a lubricant between these plates. You can think of the fault zone as an air hockey table. When the fluid pressure is high, it's like you've turned the air on. That means the friction between the plates is reduced, which allows the plates to move. But if the fluid pressure is lower, the two plates can lock together, which then leads to the buildup of stress. Not that they'll feel bad. In the context of tectonic plates, stress is some pressure or force that can cause deformation. And if this stress starts to build up, at some point, it's gotta go somewhere. When it's too much, it can trigger earthquakes and most likely, not small ones. For example, a release of stress in the Cascadia subduction zone could lead to a magnitude 9 earthquake. For comparison, the biggest earthquake we've ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960, and it had a magnitude of 9.5. The damage was enormous. So we hope the water will stay in its reservoir and keep maintaining the delicate balance between the tectonic plates. We've explored only 5% of the ocean. Who knows how many cool things are there at the bottom, waiting to be found? For example, check out these mysterious holes scientists have stumbled upon in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, near the Azores. They're neatly aligned and are about 4 inches apart, or in some cases, even several feet. They resemble punctures left by a sewing machine. Some think these holes could have a biological origin. For instance, some fish may have made them while walking along the seafloor. Others believe we could be looking at something that's human-made, maybe left by a spiked tire. Of course, such holes are perfect for making up stories about creatures from other planets who allegedly made them. Or maybe even legendary monsters, like that one from Loch Ness. It's definitely hard to explain such symmetry of the holes, but one deep-sea biologist offered a pretty good explanation. He said there could be an animal burrowing beneath the sediment, and from time to time, it could make little chimneys just to get access to clean water circulation in its small burrow. I mean, there are sediment piles around the opening of each hole, and they do support the idea that something pushed the soil from below. But there's still no proof these holes are actually connected beneath the surface. And there are also a lot of things hidden at the bottom of the oceans and seas that ancient civilizations left us. For instance, archaeologists made a really cool discovery off the southern coast of Croatia, a road hidden under layers of sea mud that's 7,000 years old. They found the ancient road at the sunken Neolithic site of Solin. The site of Solin was a human-made island in ancient times, and an archaeologist discovered it 2 years ago. He was studying satellite images of the area around Korčula, one of the beautiful Croatian islands. When he realized there could be something interesting at the bottom of the sea, he dove into the water with his colleague. And under the surface of the Adriatic Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean Sea, at a depth of 13 to 16 feet, they found stone walls that were most likely part of some ancient settlement. The landmass where people built the settlement was separated from the main island by a narrow stretch of land. Luckily, this area is protected from big waves by the surrounding islands, so the site remained relatively well preserved. It's now hidden beneath the surface of the sea and covered in mud. But it's so exciting to imagine how people walked on that road nearly 7,000 years ago, visiting nearby settlements. If you want to see the weirdest creatures, you can always head to the bottom of the sea. Actually, scientists have determined there could be more than 30 potentially new species at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. They've collected them using their remote-controlled vehicle. That's a big step because until recently, they could only study such creatures through photographs. I'm talking about segmented worms, different types of coral, some invertebrates similar to centipedes, and many others. But there are also many old freaky creatures that we already know about that look like they came from sci-fi movies. Red octopus, blobfish. Okay, this one kinda looks normal until you raise it to the surface. The goblin shark, Sloane's viperfish, zombie worms. Ugh. Yeah, I hear ya. Let's move on. The seafloor hides things from space too. There are traces of rare forms of plutonium and iron at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And what's awesome is that all this has come from space. These radioactive materials probably formed during some kind of cataclysmic event in space and eventually made their way out to our beautiful home planet. And this extraterrestrial debris most likely appeared on Earth within the past 10 million years. After it fell to the Pacific Ocean and settled at a depth of almost a mile, it became part of all those layers of rock down there. Plutonium is especially exciting for scientists. I mean, only tiny amounts of it have been found. Hundreds of atoms maybe. But it's still remarkable because these atoms are created by exploding stars. Things like this can help us better understand how the universe produces elements heavier than iron, like plutonium, gold, uranium, and platinum. We're still not sure about the origins of these elements. For a long time, scientists believed that supernovae, which is when a star comes to its end in a fabulous explosion, were responsible for creating these heavy elements. But it seems it's not just that. Some other cosmic events, such as the collision of neutron stars, which are super dense collapsed stars, or some rare types of supernovae, could also be involved. Whoa, let me get my popcorn!
It's 9:59 a.m. when a man is jolted awake in his bed by a powerful, mysterious force. While he's trying to figure out what's going on, a giant 100-foot-tall column of water is already surging toward his hometown. In 20 minutes, most of his friends and family members will lose their lives when a sky-high wall of water sweeps away buildings, trees, and cars. And it can happen to you at any given time. It's the day after Christmas in 2004. Thousands of tourists from Europe and America are enjoying tropical beaches in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia when a powerful undersea earthquake strikes off the western coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It's a 9.3 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Asia. It triggers one of the largest tsunamis in history, the Boxing Day tsunami, which will take the lives of 230,000 people within a few hours. The city of Banda Aceh in Sumatra, Indonesia, home to 260,000 people, is the closest to the earthquake's epicenter. In less than half an hour after the quake, huge 10-story tall waves crash into the city. More than 60,000 people lose their lives immediately. The destruction is so severe that almost no one in its path survives. Next, the tsunami hits Thailand. The waves, rushing at a mind-boggling 500 miles per hour across the Indian Ocean, reach the shores of Phang Nang and Phuket about 90 minutes later. Despite such a significant time gap, both locals and tourists are caught totally off guard. Many beachgoers even walk out onto the beach, curious about the strangely receding sea, only to be overtaken by a towering wall of water. Nearly 5,400 people, including 2,000 foreign tourists, won't survive that day in Thailand. An hour after Thailand, the tsunami hits southeastern India near Chennai. Debris-filled waves push miles inland, taking the lives of more than 10,000 people. Sri Lanka faces even worse devastation. The island will lose over 30,000 people, and hundreds of thousands will become homeless. The tsunami's incredible strength is evident even far away. 8 hours later, it claims its last victims in South Africa, 5,000 miles from the quake's epicenter. There, rogue waves catch swimmers off guard. Researchers from NOAA's Center for Tsunami Research explain that the destruction was due to the sheer power of the earthquake. It originated from a megathrust fault. That's where heavy ocean plates dive beneath lighter continental plates. These faults are the largest in the world and lie underwater. The 2004 earthquake ruptured a 900-mile stretch of the Indian and Australian plates, 31 miles beneath the seafloor. Plus, instead of one quick jolt, the quake lasted for 10 minutes and released an unimaginable amount of energy. During the shaking, massive sections of the seafloor moved upwards by 130 feet. That's a lot. Such a sudden movement set colossal waves rippling across the ocean. Imagine it like dropping a massive pebble into the water. The thing is, tsunami waves aren't like those surfing waves you may imagine. No, they look like a fast-moving whitewater river that floods everything in its way. If you get caught in those raging waters, it's almost impossible to survive. If the powerful currents don't pull you under, floating debris will. That's the reason why, during earthquakes, there are usually many injuries and fewer lives lost. With tsunamis, it's the opposite. There's way fewer injuries than fatalities because it's too hard to survive. Catastrophic tsunamis like the one in 2004 are rare. That's why India and Sri Lanka had no record of such disasters. This lack of experience, combined with the absence of warning systems, made the consequences of the disaster even more tragic. People didn't feel the earthquake because they were far from the epicenter. And with no natural warning signs, no official alerts, and no history of tsunamis, the waves that hit crowded coastlines had devastating effects. By the way, the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean on Earth, is where most earthquakes and tsunamis occur. Locally damaging tsunamis strike somewhere in this ocean about once every 1 to 2 years. 76% of the recorded fatal tsunamis happened in the Pacific. And 99% of tsunami casualties are caused by local or regional tsunamis, which occur more often and hit quickly. But then a question arises: could a tsunami as devastating as the Boxing Day one happen again? Unfortunately, the answer isn't very straightforward. A warning system has indeed been established in the Indian Ocean. Its goal is to alert coastal nations of potential tsunamis. But human behavior is still a critical challenge. This became clear during a real-life test in 2012. That's when many residents of Banda Aceh, Indonesia, simply ignored evacuation towers after a tsunami warning. People never seem to learn, huh? The Indian Ocean Warning Network uses undersea pressure sensors placed near tectonic plate fault lines. These sensors detect any changes and transmit data to surface buoys, which then send it via satellite to control centers on land. Authorities analyze the information and decide whether to issue warnings and evacuate at-risk areas. Aceh, located on one of the world's most active fault lines, implemented additional safeguards. They installed sirens in coastal cities, and people get alerts on their cell phones. Plus, there are evacuation towers, reinforced concrete structures capable of holding 500 people. They are special safe zones. Authorities did test how well prepared people were. In 2009, 18 Indian Ocean countries participated in an evacuation drill, simulating a large earthquake. Thousands of coastal communities took part in this drill, and officials concluded that the exercise had been a success. Fast forward to the system's first real test in April 2012. An 8.6 magnitude undersea earthquake west of Aceh triggered tsunami warnings. And even though there were no significant waves, the whole situation revealed critical flaws. Many residents ignored evacuation towers, choosing instead to flee by car or motorbike. This led to citywide traffic jams, with people getting stranded in areas vulnerable to a potential tsunami. It was chaos. Some residents even went back to the beach to look for the signs of a tsunami, which is a life-threatening mistake. So apparently, there is still a lot of work to do when it comes to tsunami survival. But what you need to know by heart is the signs of an impending tsunami. First of all, it's severe ground shaking. Strong earthquakes near coastal areas can generate tsunamis. If you notice that water on the beach starts to recede at an alarming rate, exposing the ocean floor, reefs, and stranded fish, run. Then there might be unusual ocean sounds. Keep in mind that a loud roaring noise, resembling a train or jet engine, may accompany an approaching tsunami. If you notice any of these warning signs, Do not wait for official evacuation orders. Leave low-lying coastal areas immediately and move to higher ground as fast as possible. If you're at home, make sure your family members know about the tsunami and follow official guidance. You should remember that locally generated tsunamis may strike within minutes. You have to act quickly. If it's a distant tsunami, you may have more time to evacuate. If you don't have an opportunity to move inland, hide in high reinforced concrete buildings. Avoid staying in small buildings or homes in low-lying areas. If you're on a boat, stay offshore. Tsunami activity isn't as dangerous in deep water, so avoid returning to port during a tsunami warning. If you're already in port, check with harbor authorities for guidance. If it's possible to move to deep water, do it in an orderly manner. It may be safer for small boat owners to leave their vessel and move to higher ground. And always, prioritize moving to higher ground over saving your belongings. If you live in a coastal area, you can take some measures to protect your property in advance. Since most tsunami waves are under 10 feet, you may consider elevating your house. It can reduce damage. You can also consult an engineer to assess and reinforce your home. And finally, don't forget to protect outbuildings too, and create fences that will allow animals to reach higher ground. Around 2,500 years ago, an earthquake completely changed the course of one of the largest and most famous rivers on the planet, the Ganges. Now, it's normal for rivers not to sit in one place, so if you live next to one, it could also just disappear without a trace or flood the whole city one day. In the case of the Ganges River, a supermassive earthquake became the reason for this dramatic change. Scientists say it might happen again, and it would be a huge problem for millions of people who depend on this river. The Ganges River starts as small streams in the Himalayas and travels a long way, over 1,500 miles. Along its journey, it meets other big rivers before all the water flows into the Bay of Bengal. The Ganges has the largest delta in the world among all rivers. Just like many other rivers in the region, it slowly changes its path over time. These changes, if they happen when a river wears away its banks, usually takes a long time, sometimes decades. Scientists have discovered that the Ganges-Brahmaputra river system has shifted several times over the last 6,000 years. When they looked at satellite images of the Ganges Delta, they noticed something interesting. There was a crescent-shaped dip in the ground about 28 miles away from where the river is flowing now. This depression was over 1 mile wide and stretched for many miles. They thought it might have been an old main channel of the Ganges River a long time ago. In 2018, the team decided to visit the area to check it out for themselves and take samples to learn more about it. While driving back home, they noticed a pit where someone was digging dirt to create a pond. The next day, they planned to fill it with water, but the researchers spotted something strange in the dirt. There were vertical bands of light-colored sand mixed into the darker mud. These special layers are clues from the past. They show that an ancient earthquake made sand and water shoot up from below the ground and created sand volcanoes that were trapped in time. The scientists studied the sand and mud and figured out that these earthquakes happened around 2,500 years ago and were strong, with magnitudes of 7 to 8. The epicenter was over 110 miles away from the main stem of the river, but it was powerful enough to displace it. It could have affected around 140 million people. The Ganges-Brahmaputra system is close to spots where Earth's tectonic plates meet, so earthquakes happen here often. There's no danger right now, but scientists think that another massive earthquake could happen in the next few hundred or thousand years. It could threaten up to 170 million people. That's about half the population of the U.S. No one can predict exactly when an earthquake will happen or how strong it will be. Learning how earthquakes in the past moved rivers helps scientists figure out patterns and make guesses about similar events in the future. This knowledge could help us prepare better and create safety plans before another big earthquake strikes. Now, the Ganges isn't the only river at risk. The Yellow River, the Irrawaddy River, and rivers in the United States like the Klamath and San Joaquin all face similar dangers. The mighty Mississippi River has also switched its path many times over the last 7,000 years. Right now, there's a huge system of dams and barriers called a control structure in central Louisiana. This structure's job is to stop the Mississippi from spilling over its banks and joining a nearby river. But scientists think that, in theory, these barriers wouldn't handle mega floods. So the Mississippi could break free and change its course again. This would cause massive problems, especially in southern Louisiana. One of the recent examples when a river changing its course caused disaster was the Kosi River in India. In August 2008, over just a few days, the river's path shifted by almost 60 miles, which is a huge change. Floods happen in some parts of the state rather often, but they hadn't seen such strong ones in over 50 years. They affected around 1,000 villages and 3 million people, and about 1 million people had to be evacuated to safety. Since many of these people hadn't faced floods in so long, they weren't ready to handle it quickly. It caused even more damage to their homes and lives. Scientists have been trying for decades to figure out what exactly makes rivers suddenly change their course. A new study explains that two things work together to make a river to do it. This process is called avulsion. First, there's the setup, which is like building up tension before something big happens. Over time, sediment, sand, dirt, and other stuff carried by the river gets deposited in certain places. It either raises the river above the land around it or makes a nearby slope steeper than the river's current path. Then there's the trigger, which is like the final straw that makes everything happen. This trigger could be a big flood, an earthquake, or even something like a pile of logs blocking the water. Now, researchers looked at satellite images of about 170 cases of avulsion from the past 50 years. They noticed these events happen most often near river mouths and near mountains. Rivers were about 3 times more likely to change course in these places than in the areas between them. They also studied 58 river channels in detail, using super clear maps to measure super elevation. That's how high the river is compared to the land around it. They also measured slope advantage. That's how steep a new path might be compared to the river's current one. They found that near mountains, rivers often pile up so much sediment that they become super elevated and spill over. But near river mouths, like in deltas, rivers need a steep slope advantage to break through the mud and form a new path. These two factors work together like a seesaw. If one is stronger, the other doesn't need to be as strong for an avulsion to happen. To figure out where a river might go if it changes course, the researchers created a smart computer algorithm. This tool uses maps to measure the terrain steepness and the river's flow to predict where the river might move. They tested it on 10 past avulsions, and it correctly guessed the path every single time. Scientists hope they could use these findings to protect people living near rivers from sudden floods. Rivers changing course played a big role in creating one of the first organized administration systems in the world. Scientists found clues for this in the territory of ancient Mesopotamia. This name means the land between two rivers, and it was between the rivers Tigris and the Euphrates. People living there relied on these rivers for water, food, and transportation. Scientists wanted to figure out how these sudden changes in these rivers affected ancient people. To do this, they used two kinds of maps. The archaeological maps show how ancient cities grew over time, including what types of buildings people built. Certain buildings, like big palaces or city walls, could show when each city first had an organized administration. The second kind of map showed where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flowed long ago. They often shifted, sometimes slowly, and sometimes very quickly and dramatically. Around the year 5000 BCE, Mesopotamia started to become drier and farming became harder. Farmers had to grow their crops near rivers, where they could use the natural floods to water their fields or dig little channels to bring river water to their plants. Because farming was so important, towns and cities grew near the rivers too, so people could stay close to their food. But when a river suddenly changed its course, people didn't give up. They worked together to dig long canals to bring water from the new river path back to their fields. The canals helped them get water again, and the administration buildings showed they were organizing as a community to solve big problems together. The Boxing Day tsunami, Indonesia. An undersea earthquake starts in the morning. Its tremors cause a series of tsunami waves. The largest reaches the height of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Unzen volcano mega tsunami. A powerful volcanic eruption triggers a landslide from a 4,000-year-old lava dome. It sweeps through the city of Shimabara and reaches the sea, setting off a mega tsunami. The Vajont Dam mega tsunami, Italy. A landslide drags 9 billion cubic feet of forest, soil, and rock into the lake. A dark wall of water covers the sky over a tiny village at the bottom of the Vajont Dam. Then, with a deafening roar, the wave overtops the edge of the dam, taking out everything in its path. Mount St. Helens mega tsunami, USA. As the volcano erupts, the upper 1,500 feet of Mount St. Helens collapses into a massive landslide. Part of this avalanche plunges down into nearby Spirit Lake, which splashes the lake waters into a series of waves almost as tall as the Eiffel Tower. Alaska's Lituya Bay tsunami. A landslide caused by an earthquake creates a mega wave. It surges over the headland and washes away trees, plants, and soil down to bedrock. Molokai, Hawaii. A third of the East Molokai volcano caves in and collapses into the Pacific Ocean. This causes a tsunami the size of the second tallest building in the world, Shanghai Tower. The waves reach Mexico and California. The Yucatan asteroid tsunami. The asteroid, which is rumored to have wiped out dinosaurs, strikes the Yucatan Peninsula. It creates a mega tsunami, the largest in Earth's history. The first wave's almost twice bigger than the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa. Hurricane Mitch. Mitch forms in the western Caribbean Sea. Soon it strengthens to become the 8th most powerful Atlantic hurricane ever. The storm pours 4 inches of rain per hour for 2 days in Honduras. It causes terrible mudslides and floods. Hurricane Allen. Rare and extremely powerful, the storm is one of the few to reach Category 5, the highest possible. It causes more than $2 billion in damage. The Great Hurricane. After tearing down Barbados, the storm moves on. It strips the bark off the trees growing on Martinique and St. Lucia and travels further. This horrific natural disaster lasts for 6 days. Hurricane Dorian. It's the most powerful tropical cyclone to hit the Bahamas. The hurricane flattens most of the structures on the islands and sweeps them into the sea. Hurricane Wilma. The storm occurs in the Caribbean Sea near Jamaica and heads to the west. 2 days later, it gathers enough power to turn into the most intense hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic Ocean. Hurricane Patricia. A regular storm develops a well-defined eye and turns into a Category 5 hurricane within a mere 24 hours. At one point, it travels faster than a Ferrari moving at its top speed. It makes Patricia the world's most intense tropical cyclone ever recorded. Kamchatka earthquake. It happens in the early morning 80 miles away from the shores of Kamchatka. The earth tremors produce a tsunami. The first 2 waves are catastrophic, up to 60 feet high. The third one's much weaker. Valparaiso earthquake, Chile. It happens at about 5 a.m. along the boundary of 2 tectonic plates. The tsunami, triggered by the earthquake, wipes out 620 miles of Chile's coastline. Tohoku earthquake, Japan. The first earth tremors start at a great underwater depth. The earthquake is so strong it moves Japan's main island. It shifts the planet on its axis by up to 10 inches and increases its rotation speed. The disaster also triggers a tsunami with 133-foot high waves that travel 6 miles inland. Indian Ocean earthquake, Sumatra. A rupture along 2 tectonic plates sets off an undersea earthquake. It begins at about 8 a.m. near northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It makes the planet vibrate nearly a half inch and sets off earthquakes all over the world up to Alaska. Good Friday earthquake, Alaska. The most powerful earthquake recorded in North America lasts for 4 minutes and 38 seconds. A 600-mile-long crack causes terrible landslides and a 27-foot tsunami. Areas 200 miles away get raised by 30 feet. Other places permanently drop 8 feet. Valdivia, Chile. The Great Chilean Earthquake starts in the afternoon and lasts for no less than 10 minutes. The disaster affects an area the size of California. It triggers tsunamis that reach the shore of Hawaii, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand. The average tornado usually lasts less than 10 minutes, but there are exceptions. El Reno tornado. It's considered the world's largest tornado based on width. At its peak, the twister reaches 2.5 miles across. The Perryville tornado, U.S. It occurs at about 2 a.m. and starts with snapping hardwood trees and breaking down stone constructions. Then the whirlwind becomes stronger. It levels 2-story buildings, flips and tosses cars as if they were toys. Bridge Creek Moore tornado. When the twister gets into the town of Bridge Creek, its width is at its peak, 1 to 1.5 miles. The wind speed of the tornado reaches more than 300 miles per hour. This natural disaster causes $1 billion in damage. Manitoba, Canada. An outstanding tornado rages for nearly 3 hours. It breaks tons of trees and utility poles, damages roads and farmhouses, but miraculously misses every town on its path. Tri-State tornado, U.S. The world's longest-lasting single tornado travels 220 miles through Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. The average tornado's path is usually no longer than 5 miles. Tupelo, Gainesville, U.S. An outbreak that consists of at least 12 single tornadoes wipes out everything on its way. The accompanying rainstorms also trigger severe flash floods that make matters even worse. Valjean landslide, Italy. At 10 p.m., a landslide with a volume of 100 Great Pyramids of Giza breaks off from the top of Monte Toc. It falls into the Valjean Dam Reservoir, producing a tsunami wave taller than the Golden Gate Bridge. Yunnan, China. An avalanche of rocks, stones, and mud, so big it could fill up Sydney Harbor, forms a dam on the Jinsha River. The Hida River, Japan. Triggered by a rainstorm, 300,000 Olympic swimming pools of debris flows down before getting stopped by another, earlier landslide. Along the way, the landslide sweeps 2 buses off the road. Peru. A rock slide dams the Rio Montanero, a long river running through the center of Peru. The whole process takes no more than 3 minutes, which means the landslide moves at a speed of up to 87 miles per hour. It also leaves a trail of debris 5 miles long. The Usoy Dam, Tajikistan. Set off by a magnitude 7.4 earthquake, the rockslide falls into the Murghab River and blocks its flow. That's how the Usoy Dam, one of the tallest in the world, appears. Mount St. Helens, USA. At 8:30 a.m., after much buildup, a volcanic vent finally gives way and sets off a catastrophic eruption, which makes the entire north side of Mount St. Helens fall away. It's the world's largest recorded landslide. North Bonneville, U.S. In the middle of the 15th century, a great earthquake occurs. An incredible amount of debris rushes down from Table Mountain. It covers more than 5 square miles and blocks the Columbia River with a dam 200 feet high and 3.5 miles long. Floods, tornadoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, yikes. All these natural disasters can get extremely dangerous, but we're kind of familiar with them. But how about a natural disaster that has never happened before, but could occur any moment now? It might be a super eruption. That's what happens when a supervolcano erupts. You might know that Yellowstone Park is located on top of a supervolcano. The last massive eruption there happened about 664,000 years ago, and the one before that, approximately 1.3 million years ago. If we do the math, we'll understand that the next eruption might be due anytime soon. There's no strong evidence that the supervolcano is waking up or preparing for an eruption, but what would it be like if it did happen? Months before the eruption, small-scale earthquakes would become more frequent and more powerful in the area. Not long before the eruption, the growing pressure would push up the ground over the volcano, creating a dome. Narrow cracks would open along the edges of this dome. The magma would then start rising toward the surface, and then the eruption would kick off. A massive column of lava and ash would shoot up into the air to a height of over 16 miles. The volcano would keep pumping ash for days on end. The air in that area would heat up to 570 degrees Fahrenheit. For all living creatures, ash fallout would be one of the most dangerous consequences of the eruption. Buildings and trees would start collapsing under the weight of this dense substance. It would only take a couple of days for a 10-foot layer of ash to cover the territory of about 50 miles around the center of the eruption. After the ash got into the stratosphere, the temperatures all over the world would start to drop. The eruption would also be rich in sulfur, and this element is an effective sun blocker. That's why it would soon get so cold that there would be no summer in the whole world for the next several years. The monsoon seasons would change. It would be hard for animals to find food and clean water. Well now, how about a gamma ray burst? You don't stumble across this kind of radiation in your everyday life. A gamma ray burst occurs when two neutron stars collide. The collapse of a massive star can produce it too. Gamma rays could present a serious danger to Earth. If a gamma ray burst happened close to our home planet, it could rip our ozone layer away. After that, we would be left unprotected from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Plus, gamma rays could also produce ground ozone. This kind of ozone could seep into the ocean since it's water-soluble, and that would lead to a mass extinction of marine life. Plants wouldn't survive this disaster either. Now, come to think of it, giant sinkholes could swallow entire communities. One of such sinkholes opened up in the city of New York. It pulled a parked van into the earth. That happened in the summer of 2022. And it wasn't the only sinkhole to appear in that area. Local inhabitants reported about 4,000 sinkholes all over the city. This kind of problem is also very common in Florida, and it's much more serious than it may sound. Sinkholes open all of a sudden, pulling down everything and everyone that happens to be nearby. Sinkholes appear all over the world, which makes them a global problem. They're totally unpredictable and form without warning. Luckily, experts know what causes them. In some areas, there are vast areas of groundwater. But during droughts, this water dries up. This creates large empty caverns, and after heavy rains, the surface over such a cavern can collapse, creating a sinkhole within minutes. Now, what if we came across a wandering black hole? You might know that a black hole is a region in space where gravity is so powerful that not even light can escape its clutches. Luckily, the nearest one to us is 1,500 light-years away. Nothing to worry about, right? Until you find out about wandering black holes. Now, things get definitely way creepier. If such a black hole entered the solar system, Earth would be doomed. We wouldn't stand a chance against this space monster. In 2012, 13 wandering black holes were spotted not so far away from our planet. But worry not. Not far away, in space terms, means around 1 billion light-years away. So we've got some time left. Plus, the possibility of such a disaster is very, very low. Another natural disaster we haven't experienced yet is a mega flood. It's never happened before, but the changes in climate do make for a risky potential. It could start, let's say, in California. This state experienced some really bad flooding in the past. One of such floods stretched up to 60 miles across and 300 miles long. If a similar disaster happened these days, it would cause $1 trillion worth of damage. It would also uproot millions of people. Now let's talk about a hypercane. Judging from the name, this natural disaster might get extreme. A hypercane is a theoretical hurricane of unsurpassed power. It would occur if the ocean became overheated as a result of climate change, or because of a massive volcanic eruption. In any case, these conditions could create a hurricane that would stretch way beyond the lower stratosphere. And as you may guess, regular hurricanes don't do that. The hypercane speed would reach 500 miles per hour. The pressure inside would be low enough not to let the hypercane to wear out as quickly as other hurricanes. The hypercane could last for weeks on end. But the worst thing? It could damage or even destroy part of Earth's ozone layer, and the hole could be the size of the entire North American continent. Now, this disaster did happen before. About 66 million years ago. I bet you know what I'm hinting at. Yep, that very meteor that supposedly wiped out dinosaurs off the face of the Earth. This 7-mile-wide space visitor was traveling at 67,000 miles per hour. As a result of the collision, 75% of all life on the planet disappeared, and winter reigned on Earth for 18 months. Want to know a secret? Meteors strike Earth all the time. Even more of them barely miss our planet. But it's also very hard to predict meteor strikes. Scientists miss a lot of them until they just nearly miss us. That's why experts are working on an early warning system that could prevent disasters. It could make meteor impacts less catastrophic, or at least allow people time to evacuate. It could also be our very own sun that would be responsible for another natural disaster. I'm talking about a massive solar flare. On the scale of damage to society, few catastrophes can compare to this event. It wouldn't destroy buildings like a tsunami or an earthquake. Neither would it end lives in the same way a supervolcano or meteor would. But it would cripple our entire way of life by destroying the whole electronic infrastructure of Earth. The cost of this disaster would reach trillions of dollars. It'd cause other infrastructures to fail. Communication, medicine, transportation, banking systems. Those would tumble like dominoes, and it would be incredibly hard to recover them. Earth would be left without electricity for years. There would be no electric light, no computers, no phones. Water supply systems would be out of order. There would be no food in supermarkets. There would be no electricity, and people wouldn't be able to reboot the already broken power grids. In 1859, people all over the world woke up in the middle of the night. It was as light as during the day. The skies were illuminated with auroras, red, green, purple. They appeared even in the regions where no one had seen them before, like the Bahamas, Jamaica, or Hawaii. Telegraphs got electrically charged, even though they were disconnected. In many areas, fires started. That was when technology barely existed. But imagine the avalanche of problems a solar flare could cause today.